How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. My name is Brian Funk, and I'm your host. I make music as AfroDJMac, and this is the show where we talk about all things making music, the creative process, and following your art, your passion, and making things come to life. And today, my guest is a very big part of that part of the process in making this all possible for me, because he runs the site Gumroad.com. He's the creator, the CEO, and that's Sahil Lavingia. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you very much for being here.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to be here and talk about music a little bit, but also making stuff, selling stuff, doing what you love, which is what we're all trying to do. So
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Gumroad. I've been using it for probably 3-4 years now. And I've come through a couple other much clunkier services to sell mostly digital downloads and things like that. And Gumroad just changed everything for me. And it's where I recommend everyone go if you're into selling some kind of digital good, especially downloads or video courses. I think it's a really excellent service. And, you know, part of the thing about having you here is just to say thank you to you for creating that and making my life a little easier and making my ability to justify all the time I spend doing this possible.
that's the best. I mean, it's always cool to meet someone who's made money on Gumroad, right? That's a component of it. But really, it's about when someone says, like, I was able to do more of this thing that they really love to do, make art, make music, film a documentary, whatever it is. Like, that's the cool stuff, right? Like, that's why I built Gumroad, was for myself to make stuff and sell stuff. But really, that's what it's all about. Like, the money is very secondary, I think.
Well, I think that's part of what makes it special. As a musician, playing shows, going to venues, sometimes there's this like conflict between the artist and the venue owner. Where we're just coming from different perspectives, really. That's all it is. And the best places to play are always the places where the venue owner is also a musician who plays out too. So they understand both sides of it.
Totally.
And I think that's something you've built with Gumroad as an artist yourself. You have the understanding, and you know what you're looking for and what's right, what's fair. And that's, I think, a big part of what makes it so special.
Yeah, I remember when we first started, like, Gumroad started in 2011, and we were trying to figure out what we called our users, our sellers. And because I don't like the word users, like, it has just kind of like this very transactional feel to it. And we went with creators, and it was weird because people didn't get it. They're like, they're not creating, like, they're merchants, they're sellers, they're businesses, and or establishments or what have you. And I was like, well, no, I mean, they create stuff. Like, they're creative. The thing that they're monetizing is creativity, not anything else. But now luckily it's great. If you say, oh, we help creators, everyone kind of knows now what that means, right? But back then it was kind of a weird thing for people. Like, creators, aren't those just like those weird people that are on like Kickstarter or whatever, making comics or something, But yeah, and it's funny, like, I never called myself an artist. I would consider myself an artist for sure, but I always felt like that was reserved for like real artists, and I was like making software. But now I realize, like, Gumroad is a piece of art, that I'm proud of creating. Just like any other thing that's sold on Gumroad, it's its own product with its own audience. And I love that because it keeps me honest about building it, right? Because it's like, it's just like, it's very meta. It's like, it's the thing that we make is a product that helps other people make stuff, and we get paid by getting other people paid for the stuff that they make, for the stuff that we make. So it's like, it's just that alignment that you were mentioning about the venue and that disconnect, it's minimal with us because we're in the same position that you're in, selling your stuff. You know,
Right.
so it's just really fun. It's like I get along with the people that use Gumroad. You know, like they're the coolest people. Like they're people that I could go grab a beer with and talk for like 6 hours at a bar straight about the creative process and ideas and marketing and distribution and all sorts of stuff. Um, and I don't like hanging out with business people at all. Like
Yeah.
that stuff does not excite me personally that much. You
Well,
know?
you are a creative yourself, an artist, a writer.
Yeah.
So I think
Totally.
you get that, and understand the tools that need to be there. Um, I had an art teacher in high school. You were talking about calling yourself an artist, and she was great. And I remember her saying, like, kind of sitting us down and saying, like, the minute you put like that pen to the paper or you put that brush to the canvas or start shaping that clay, she's like, you're an artist.
Yeah.
You are now an artist. Whereas there are other things, other tasks you can do, other jobs where you don't become that thing until much later.
Mhm.
But right away, you're an artist. And it was really empowering to
Yeah.
have that kind of vote of confidence from, because there is no like point you reach where you get like your little artist certificate or license or something, right?
There's no test or anything like.
Yeah.
There's no bar for that for artists or.
Uh
Yeah,
huh.
it's it's just made up, right? Like I don't know. It feels like 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 English, right? Like you read a book, you learn all the rules in school, and then you read a book that breaks them all,
Uh
and you're
huh.
like,
Exactly. Yeah.
there's no like spell check. I mean, there is a spell check, but it's not like you need to go through it to publish a book. Like these are all arbitrary things that we've decided upon.
hmm
It's a cool thing, I think.
As my professional job, the like formal grown up job, I'm a high school English teacher. And it is funny to teach these rules of writing and grammar and proper spelling. And then we pick up a book and, like you said, what happened to all that, Mr. Funk? You told us we can't do this. And now this person who's a professional writer is
Yeah,
doing that. And it
yeah,
leads to fun conversations, actually, of, well, here's why. This is why we
yeah,
have the rule. And this is why it's cool to break it here.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I think having an understanding that there are guidelines, right, and
hmm
they're the reasoning behind some of these guidelines. Not to say you need to follow them all, but it's true. I mean, it's true in business, and like a few months ago, we started releasing our numbers publicly, all our revenue and profit, um, and we'll do more of that going forward as well. And I remember like just being really scared to do that, like because very few people do that. Like here's all the metrics behind our business. Um, but I couldn't find a good reason like why that was the case. Like, and it's kind of I think similar. Like there are these rules and these guidelines that exist, and you can figure out like you can do the research and kind of figure out why that is. But they're not. I mean, there's nothing illegal about publishing our growth numbers and the reason is that I wanted to do it is because I wanted to like show people that Gumroad is a thing. It's a business, just like it's a product that we sell just like anything else on Gumroad, and it keeps me accountable to like a larger set of people than just like like sitting in a room with the team and like figuring out what we should do and like how to what we should build. And it's been like a really cool process, and I wish I did that more. I wish I broke the rules a little bit more.
But there is like a kind of personal friendliness to the whole platform. I feel like it's very welcoming. It makes this process of selling things online for an artist very simple and friendly.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I think, as you were saying, you started in 2011, and this whole concept of selling like a digital download of whatever it might be was a little far out, I think, to most people. And
Yeah,
now, fast forward a few years later, and
yeah,
this is,
totally.
but
Yeah. One story that I always think is funny is like when we were starting, I just built it as a weekend project initially, and I made it like these colors that you see now. We're there back then too, like these kind of pastel-y, sort of rainbow kind of colors. And I remember like everyone being really confused, like why would you kind of like with the whole creator merchant thing, like why would you use those
Mhm.
colors? Like that's when you think payments, you think white, white, gray, and blue. Those are, silver. They're all white, gray, blue, right? Stripe, any of these things. And I was like, I'm not talking to the people that most payments companies talk to. I'm talking to artists, musicians, designers, writers, filmmakers, comedians. Like it's just fun. And it's like what I want to do. Like I'm not, at the time it was a weekend project. I wasn't like, okay, here's my 40-page business plan. It was like, I just want to build this thing because I want it to exist, and it doesn't, which I think is kind of the best way to build and think, music, right? I mean, like, people can make music for whatever reason they want. But I think some of the best music is the music that's made because people wanted to listen to something that didn't even exist. And they're like, I wish, like, it would be cool if, you took, Chance the Rapper and put it over jazz or whatever. That doesn't exist or something like that, and then making it, figuring out like how you make that thing, and then making it, and then hopefully, other people wanted the same thing. That's happens a lot, especially with the internet. And then all of a sudden you have an audience, and you're doing the thing that you love, and like you have a few people listening to you.
I think that creates like an authenticity for the product or whatever it is, your art.
Yeah,
I feel hesitant to call it a product, but like it makes it real. It had an actual reason for coming into existence.
Yeah, and people can feel that, like if you're not. I think there's two things that happen. One, people notice. Like if you really, like, I'm trying to get into drawing and painting, and if you're painting people when you want to paint trees or whatever, like people can tell that you just don't enjoy the subject matter that much. And then two, you're not going to do it that much, and if you really like doing something, you're just going to end up doing it a lot more. And then that's going to make you better at it. And the better you are at it, the more you want to do it because your stuff is awesome. People always email me, and then there's like two questions I always get. One of them is like, I want to learn to code, but I don't know how. Like, how do I build a thing? And I'm like, learn how to code. And like, imagine if you emailed me and was like, hey, like I have a really great idea for a song, but like I don't know music, just anything. I don't know my scales. I don't know how to play piano. I've never taken a vocal lesson. Like I have a great idea for a song. Could you intro me to like an artist, and we can like partner on a song? That's an absurd idea, right? Maybe it's not, but that's kind of what people do all the time. Like you need to learn the fundamental skills, and then the business stuff is easy to like layer on top of that. Right. But if you don't have that fundamental stuff, like it doesn't matter how good you are at marketing or sales or branding or whatever buzzword you want to use, like it's just gonna fall flat.
Yeah, that passion needs to drive you through the hard stuff.
Yeah,
I take
totally.
I take a martial arts class, and our teacher always says something like, everybody wants to be a fighter, but nobody wants to become a fighter. Because he usually breaks that out when we're all huffing and puffing, sweating, and can barely move.
Yeah.
But
totally.
That grind of it is like the part that you have to have a love to get through that. You have to have something you're reaching towards.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to like hear that and be like, I don't love it. Like I'm still gonna do it to exercise or whatever.
Yeah.
But like not like, but like being honest about that. Like I would love to have an album one day like that. I listen to music like everybody does, and there's some songs and some artists that I think are incredible and life-changing. But I don't think I would ever love the art of making music as much as I love programming or drawing or coming up with ideas, and that's okay. Like I still might pursue that. I might get better at it. The great thing about things like Gumroad is you can go online and pay a little bit of money and start learning. You don't need to go to a university for 4 years,
right?
But yeah, I do think love, if you really want to do something full time, like you need to love doing it. And you need to be okay doing it to do it, not because you want to have had done it. If that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
everyone wants to have made a great album. Right? Like who is like, here, if you could like go like this and everyone would do it. It's like the process of becoming an amazing artist. I always say, like, I don't like going to the gym. Like, I like having gone to the
Right.
gym.
Afterwards.
That's the
Yeah.
best. Um, and that's okay. I'm never going to be a professional weightlifter or whatever. But yeah, I do think for the thing that you want to make your core, like the thing, you got to love it
Mm.
long term. I think you might not love it immediately, but you got to have faith that you will end up loving
Yeah.
it. You know?
I think that's a good point too, to be honest, that you don't always love it, because there are parts of making music that are a little bit of a grind. And I tell people, especially like when I'm teaching, that this is hard. Making music is hard. It's there's a lot of suffering that goes into this, and you have to accept that. And sometimes I hate it. I really do. And it's frustrating, and you want to pull your hair out or just give up or something.
Yeah.
And because I think when you just paint it to be like it's a labor of love and it's just all like rainbows and fun the whole time.
Yeah, you just you get a little tipsy and you just like mash on a keyboard or whatever.
Yeah, it takes the reality out of it. And then I think a lot of people will say, maybe I'm not cut out for it, or maybe I don't love it enough, or maybe
Yeah.
it's not for me. When
Yeah.
everyone suffers through that stuff, and
Yeah.
and that's part of the growth, I guess. But
Yeah. I think love, like, love should not be confused with like ecstasy or something,
yeah,
like love I think, I don't know. To me, it means like you love it, like you want to understand it more and more and more, and like deepening your understanding in it is going to grow you as a person. It does not necessarily mean like you're going to wake up every day and like you want to just do it. And like I'm sure the best the best athletes, the best musicians, like they have days where they wake up and they're like, I don't want to do the thing. But they still love, the sport or the hobby that they have, the profession that they have. Like for me, like I love painting. I love painting so much. I'm not good at painting, I think, not yet. Getting better. But I know, like, I love the idea of taking a thing in my head and like making it feel like it exists, right? And figuring that out. And to me, that like it's the journey and it's like the growth that will come along with being able to do that. That is exciting to me, and that's the thing that I love. It's not necessarily like people tell me all the time, oh, like, do you love programming? And I'm like, I don't love programming. Like programming is like sitting on, like hitting keys. It's typing. Programming is not that exciting. What's exciting is saying like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this feature exists, and then like 3 hours later the feature exists and people can use it, and people are either able to monetize a product they weren't able to monetize before, or they're able to sell something, or they're they save 5 minutes a day or whatever it is, or 3 clicks there. That's what's really cool. And building like a product that just does something super 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 well, that's what I love more than anything, and communicates an idea and lets people do the thing that they love. But like the actual act of programming is not that exciting, personally.
it's alive moment. That
Yeah,
feeling.
the
Yeah.
creative process. It's like it's the materialization of an idea from an abstract concept into like a thing that everyone agrees upon that exists. Like it's not just in your head. To me, that is everything, right? That has nothing to do specifically with software, right? That's like, you could go up to someone and be like, hey, I have this really great idea for this song or this painting. And they're like, oh, it sounds great, man. Like, but that's not rewarding to me. Like, I need to go make the thing and then show it to them and be like, see, I told you. That's like, that is so satisfying to me.
I think that's a dangerous trap people fall into when they start telling their ideas and get the sudden like little jolt of, that's a good idea. You should, yeah, that's really nice. Because that almost replaces the feeling you get after you do the work and actually create the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. A friend of mine wrote a blog post called Zipit. Have you ever heard of this concept?
No.
Um, yeah. It's you Google, I'm sure it's on Google somewhere. But he talks about this idea that like you should just shut up more. And like with like, for example, in weight loss, right? It's very common to say, okay, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. And then you tell everyone like, hey guys, Facebook friends or whatever, like I'm going to lose 50 pounds in a year. And
way to go. You could do it.
yeah. And what happens, I think, sort of the science at least behind it, or the sociology or whatever, is that psychology, I don't know, whatever the word is that you get that reward, that dopamine or whatever, you know, like you get that reward right away.
Right.
And so the incentive is gone. You're like, oh, well, everyone's already congratulating me for having said I was going to lose weight, that like, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I've learned in my life, not on everything, but definitely on many things, that I don't tell anyone what I'm doing. And then after I've done the thing, I tell everyone. And everyone's like blown away. And then two, it's like, it forced me to commit, because if I spent like 6 months trying to get good at something and then failing, no one will ever know that part of my life. Mm-hmm. And it's just lost, you know? Like, for example, I wrote a book, like a novella, like 150 pages or something. And it took me like a year. I've been working on it for a long time. It's still not done. But I finally got it to a place where I was good enough for other people to read outside of my small writing group that we meet, that are my weekly writing group. And it felt so good to be like, hey, I made this thing. And not just like I made it, but like you can actually interact with it, consume it, and tell me it's good or not. And to me, that carrot on a stick was so motivating, right? Like every couple days when I'd work on it in the mornings, it was like, yes, the story is getting better, and it's getting better. And I literally had a list of bugs. That's how I think about everything I do in my life, as right. A list of bugs I need to fix, regardless if it's software or anything else. Mm-hmm. And so I had 100 bugs and then 50 bugs, and, you know, and it slowly would, and then I got, you know, that's what motivated me, is like, I can't have a software with bugs in it. Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's not production ready, is, you know, what it's called in the industry. So it's like kind of the same thing. It's broken. And so like, once it got to 0 bugs, I was like, okay, now I can finally tell people like I've done the thing. Yeah, it's totally true. And there's so many ideas I've had. And actually sometimes I do the opposite, where if I have an idea and I can't get it out of my head, but I just know I don't have the time to do it, I'll just tell everybody. I'll be like, hey, I have this great idea for a startup or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like tweet it. And then like 3 people will be like, hey, there's these companies working on it already. Or one person will be like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'll have lunch with him and we'll talk about it or whatever. And then I'll be like, oh great, I don't have to do it anymore. Like, I got the reward from having thought, you know, it's out of my head. Someone else, you know, it's someone else's problem now. So it goes both ways. You can use that to your advantage as well, I think.
Yeah, that actually brings me to 2 things I wanted to talk to you about. For one, there is a little bit of like social accountability, I think, too, that can be motivating when you tell people this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the opposite of not telling anyone, I guess, and using that for motivation. Maybe it depends person by person.
Yeah.
What works best for you?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. I think the way that I found it, I think, is that social accountability works with your peers in terms of what you're doing. So for example, if you have a gym buddy or something like that, I think social accountability can work really, really well, or a writing group,
right?
Or a collaborator on whatever creative project you have. I think the reward, because everyone is going through that same thing with you, right? And hopefully, and I think the problem is when you tell like your mom and your high school friends and like that you're doing something, because all of a sudden they have no context for what you're trying to do. And that I think is what creates is what, and they're not going to check in on you, right? They're not like in a month, like, how's the thing going? Right. And I think that's the issue. So I think it's great to have a core group of people. And I do basically with everything, like have some group, could be as small as just one other person that keeps me accountable.
Mm.
And sometimes it's a much larger group, and then but I try to constrain it. Like I kind of, each thing is in its own different little Venn diagram, right? Of like, these are the people that know about my writing stuff that I'm working on. These are the people that know about my art stuff. These are the people that know about Gumroad. These are the people that know about my personal like health goals or what have you. And everything. Yeah. Because I think what happens is you just try to tell everybody, and then no one really cares, honestly. Everyone's busy, right? Everyone's their own protagonist, and they're you're just an NPC. I always say that. Like you're just an NPC to everybody else. No one really thinks.
What is an NPC?
Oh, it's for people that play video games. It's a non-player character, so it's like all the all the background, right? All the people running around the world or whatever that are computers, AI. That's who you are to everybody else, and so. Yeah, I think you just end up telling everybody, you get the proof, and then no one is going to keep you accountable. So I always, I try to be focused, and limit that. So I think that helps me a lot.
That's a clever distinction, because the random sampling of people on Facebook that you told you're going to go to the gym 3 times a week aren't going to check in, but your buddy that you're working out with is like, come on, bro, going to the gym now. Get up.
Exactly.
That's much different.
Exactly. And I think social accountability is really helpful if people are in something together, because you can learn from each other, right? Like it's not just about going to the gym. It's about like sharing, workout tips or what form suggestions or whatever to sort of stretch the metaphor. And it's the same with anything. Like you can collaborate, like you can have a buddy, like a friend of yours that you keep in touch, you talk to about your music stuff, but he's not going to really get it.
Yeah.
And I think ideally you have someone that you respect, that you think is probably better than you are and more hardworking than you are. And hopefully they think the same of you. Because then you're growing together and you're growing faster than either of you would be growing individually. And that's why I like sort of the word collaboration. You don't necessarily need to be partners on the project itself, right? Like co-writers or something, but you need to have people there that you're helping, like you're spending a significant amount of your time helping them, and they're spending a significant amount of their time helping you. And just because you're going to get better from helping them, right? And it's like, for example, with me, like writing, I have a writing group of 4 people. And every week I read their writing and then I give them feedback. And it probably takes me like 2-3 hours to do. But I know that's going to help me with my own writing, because I'm spending real time critiquing them, really trying to figure out why it's broken, how to make it better. And that's perfect, like helps me out perfectly, right? And detaches me from my own personal story. So I don't have the same like stakes there. So and whereas if I was, if I had a friend, doesn't matter how good a friend, if they're like, hey, I want you to spend 3 hours a week, like helping me on my photography, like, or whatever, being my assistant, I'd be like, no, there's not, like, I'm selfish. Like I need something out of this, and so I think that's the other thing, is you need people that are actually truly invested in your success. Not just because they like you as a friend or whatever.
Yeah, well, that kind of thing, as far as writing goes, I mean, you can see those problems in their writing, and then it's easier to find it in your own, I think, because like you said, you're really attached to your own work. You kind of see it more for like what you expect it to be than what it actually is.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many times where someone will say, oh, you never like introduced that character. Like they just appeared. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, I'm pretty sure I did. Like, I'm pretty sure they had this awesome reveal. Right. And then you reread it and you're like, oh, no, that was just in my head, Yeah. So yeah, having someone that is doesn't have the same emotional attachment to the piece of work is so helpful. And all it takes is them to point it out. And then it kind of like somehow like unlocks something within yourself. And then you're like, oh yeah. And then you fix all the then you can go in but it's like you're so scared of the work required that you don't want to admit it to yourself almost, that it's like subconsciously you might know it, but it takes someone to point it out, and then you're like, oh yeah, totally, like, and then 30 hours later you've rewritten the whole thing.
Yeah, as a creator, you never get to see your creation or hear your creation for the first time. Like a piece of music you're working on, you're building it from scratch. You know each little ingredient that went in, and just like your story, you've written it and you've gone through drafts. You never get to see it fresh ever in its
Yeah,
final
totally.
state.
Yeah, you never know what it feels like. Like you never have like an unopinionated, objective view of your own music. And like I think we're almost worse than that. I don't think you. I mean, maybe that's not true. Maybe I just haven't made something good enough. But like, you don't like your stuff that much. You've worked on it like so much. You're like sick of it. That like, I don't know. At least for me, like I published one short story, and like after I'd published it, I didn't even read the final draft. You know, I was like, it's good. I'm sure it's fine. Like, I can't change it now. Like, everyone will go enjoy it, hopefully, and I'll move on to the next thing. And that's also really freeing. You know, it's freeing because you're not attached to any of this stuff. Once it's done, that you can like go move on to the next project.
Yeah, I think that's an important part in the whole process, because you can work on these things forever, writing art.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
you name it, you can do it forever. There's a time where you have to sort of cut the cord a little bit so you can move on and start fresh.
Yeah, I think one thing I've realized about myself and my creative journey, especially in the last couple of years, is that these are all really like almost like tricks in order for me to improve myself. Like I like making these things, but really the product that I'm trying to improve and deepen is myself as a human being, right? And the more like it's not about writing, it's about developing like a specific story or a specific character or a specific plot point. It's about like deepening my understanding of storytelling and of humanity and of my like of, and trying to understand the way that I think. That's like really so, and that makes it easier for me to move from project to project as well, because it's like, cool, I learned these things about myself from this project. Now I can go do this other thing in which I will learn these things about myself. And also like helps me like switch industries almost. You know, I can go from software to writing to painting, because there's so many similarities, and they're all sort of, you know, they're all sort of encircling the same goal, which is like, how do I see the world? Like, why did I build Gumroad? Like, what about my vision for the world and the sort of difference between the ideal that I had in my head versus the real that was out there that I want to fix with Gumroad, right? And why do I paint? Like, what gets me excited about painting a specific thing? And some of it sounds like I used to think like, oh, that's stupid. Like, you know, it's like English teachers, like, oh, I don't care, like why this writer like wanted to make some metaphor about this. Like, you're just making it up. Like, you don't, you know. But then I feel like as you make more and more art, you're like, no, there's like these deeper things about us that we don't understand. And I don't mean necessarily in like a religious way or anything like that, but just like there's so much about just the way that we think and do things and our bodies on a very physical basis that we just don't understand. And the more that you write and paint and just produce anything, you're going to be able to understand and break that down.
I like the way you put that, because you're learning about yourself. And I think as creators, sometimes we get this feeling like I have nothing to say. I need something to say. And sometimes you get that like viewpoint where I need to suffer first to like create good art. But there's always something to explore, and you can do that quite a lot with your art. And that's part of like the fascination for me, is exploring. And sometimes going back to my own stuff from after a little time passes, I kind of say, oh wow, you know, like that was, I was onto something there that I didn't understand, but now I get a little bit better grasp.
Yeah, there's like a level of intuition that you have built into yourself, right? And you're utilizing it and you're creating this stuff and you don't know why. Like it's, and you know, it's like hitting a keyboard and like some of it works. And the goal, I think, is to like take that, you know, and throw away the rest and do it over and over again. And then over time, figure out like why you did that in the first place. And then figure out how you can do more of that, you know? Like for example, like a really specific example is as I've been painting, I've realized that I like the color green a lot, which is actually the worst color to paint.
Oh yeah, why's that?
And the reason is because it has no temperature. So one of the things that makes paintings look appealing in photos, anything visual, is temperature variation, right? Cools and warms and oranges and reds and yellows and blues. And even things like purple. Purple is typically a cool color. Orange is typically a warmer color. But green is, they tell me what is green, warm or cool. Like no one knows, you know? And so when you're painting like a tree or set of bushes or whatever it is, or a, beanstalk, it doesn't look real. Like it looks like you've sucked all the life out of everything because it's just green. There's no temperature. And so you have to figure out how you can communicate green as an idea without painting green. You're actually painting yellows and browns and oranges and reds. And in context, it looks like you're looking at green, but what your brain is making that decision for you, right? It's understanding that it's green, but it's not actually green. It's actually, a combination of these colors together. And I just love painting greens for that purpose because I just think it's really fun. And I've always loved painting greens. I just didn't know why. And then once over time, I've started understanding as I've gotten better and I'm able to make those temperature shifts. I'm like, oh, that's really, it makes it feel really cool and vibrant and alive. And also it gives like a sense of like reality to it. And like movement and energy that you don't get when you're just painting, yellows and reds and blues. And so much of the world is green. I mean, so much of the, like people always, blue is like a very common color, right? Like a favorite colors. People think of blues a lot, but there's no blue in our life. I mean, blue is literally just the sky and blueberries. Now we have clothing and things. So like, we've been able to dye things blue.
You're
but
right,
really
it's kind of rare.
Blue is a pretty rare color. Yeah. Green is much more common. So it's kind of this like kind of cool thing. Anyways, yeah, there's all these like little decisions that, I figured out about like why I like to paint, and you were talking about like people sometimes think they don't have anything to say, which I just don't think is true. And I think maybe that phrase sometimes like makes people feel like they need to be like on a podium, like giving a speech. It's like everyone has thoughts and ideas, and like everyone likes certain types of things and doesn't like certain types of things, and it's just like knowing what you like is just as important. And then just make things that are like what you like. And turns out you're saying stuff. Like you don't need to come up with some totally crazy new original idea. I think that's one of the beautiful things about painting is that you're painting from life. You're not making anything up. You're just looking at a thing and then trying to copy it perfectly, that's what you think you're doing. Turns out you're not doing that at all because there's way too much information out there that you can't paint anything. It's just a single tree is way too complicated to paint. It would take your whole lifetime to render every single branch and every single vine of every leaf, right? So what you're doing is you're simplifying. And what you're doing when you simplify is you're figuring out the parts of the tree that you like and keeping those things and getting rid of the rest. Obviously, you might not have the skills to do it, so it doesn't look good, but already that sense of what you have to say is there. It's already present. It's present in the first thing that you ever make. And in a painting, we call it style, your visual style, right? But it's the same thing. It's your signature. It's your fingerprint.
It's the way in which you're filtering the information.
100%.
What you decide to let through.
Totally. And because it's the only way you've ever filtered information, you assume everyone is filtering the same information the same way. It's like, of course, like you look at that scene and you see like the amazing, like big building over there. And then like you like tell your friend and they're like, oh, I didn't even notice that building. I was like staring at those like two ants walking around. And it's honestly like was revelatory to me when me and a bunch of people went out painting one time, and we were all looking at the same thing. I was like, it was the first couple times I've ever painted, and I painted like a little shed or whatever. It was the only like building on the thing, right? So obviously I'm painting this little shed, and I like what everyone was painting. Like I was never so shocked to see like so many different things. Like it was crazy. It was just, there was like Van Gogh style stuff. There was like people painting the sky purple. Like it was all sorts of different things. And it's kind of like having an accent. Like everyone thinks they don't have an accent.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone else's accent is relative to theirs. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, wait a second. Like that's, this is my accent. This is like the way that I think about things. I think you said it really well. This is the way that you process information.
I think it's a great lesson you get from art when you like, especially art that requires a little interpretation. When you, like you said, you think everyone sees what you see, and then you start to realize, no, they don't. They see something that you never even realized was there. And I think it's a great metaphor for just life and just how people see the world. And even it can be something as simple as just a conversation you have with someone and how they interpret what you said. But it also gets as large as the largest issues we have.
Totally. Yeah, it's a universal. I think anytime you stumble upon something that applies to so much more than you originally thought, you're onto something, right? Like if you find out like a rule and it's like only works in this one case, like it's not that good of a rule. For example, like I before E except after C or whatever, right? Like that's a very specific thing that breaks all the time.
You gotta be careful with that one.
But like, a more universal rule is like, for example, one I believe strongly in is like, in general, information that if you can communicate the same amount of information with less, that's better. And painting is very much like that. If I can paint the same thing with 2 strokes instead of 30, the 2 strokes is going to look better. And then also software, Gumroad, it's like, okay, we need to communicate that this product costs this much money. Like if we can do that in this much text or this much text, or, like what's better? There's probably the less amount because your brain can process it faster. And same thing with music. I think if you can communicate an idea with less, with 2 tones, that is way more powerful. Like Hans Zimmer, right? Like you listen to the Inception soundtrack and like you look up like how to play the Inception on your piano or whatever. And it's like 3 notes. It's like, dun, dun, but it's amazing. And it communicates so much in like just like those 2 things, which doesn't mean it's easy. I think sometimes people get frustrated because they're like, that's it. Like it was just like these 2 notes alternating. That's all like you need to do to be like the most successful, top few, like whatever, like music composers or whatever. But it took a long time to get to that point where you knew it was those 2 notes, right? There's so many options and he picked those 2. Right. Once you see those 2 and you hear those 2, you're like, oh, duh. But you couldn't have picked those 2 without that.
Yeah. Well, in music, it's so true. I mean, because you can just keep adding and adding and adding until the world ends, Yeah.
Totally.
And I love that you're saying this, because this actually brings me to something I wanted to ask you about that I mentioned before, but also it's a big mission in my teaching with music and writing is to do less. And I know in school with writing, we teach the opposite of that because we tell you at least 250 words, at least 500 words in 3 pages or more. And it just communicates to students that more is better. And it's so entirely the opposite. Yeah. I impose word limits these days now.
Wow.
And with with music too, like people will put effects on things just to put it on there and without saying why. And half the time you wind up cluttering things up. And I've done mixes where I worked so hard and so long, adding, tweaking things, and then I just take everything off and I listen. And it's like, damn it, it sounds better with nothing on it. It's so much better when I left it alone.
Totally. It's a confidence, and sometimes you need to go through that, you know, you need to have done all that mixing before you're like, never mind.
Right.
I think that's also, you know, important. Like, you don't want to be like, I don't want to do the mixing because I'm lazy, right? But yeah, I think you're totally right. Like, you need to understand like what the goal of the thing you're making is, and you need to make sure that every component of it is contributing to that. In painting, it's like, you know, this painting has a theme, it has a point, it has a emotional resonance. That might be sadness or happiness or elation or loss or grief or suffering, whatever it is. And if you have like a component of your painting that is fighting it, just kill it, just remove it, you know? Like in writing, I see this all the time where like there's so many edits where someone will be like, hey, this character isn't working. And I'll spend so long trying to fix the character. And then almost every single time the answer is kill the character, like get rid of them entirely. Merge them, like take some of their ideas and merge them with another character and make that character really interesting and even more interesting and complex and dynamic. And by the way, your reader's never going to know.
Yeah.
You know, that's like the magic trick is like, they're going to read it the first time and they're going to be like, wow, this character is so amazing and so interesting and so complex. Like, this person's a genius. And you're there, you know, they don't have to know that you actually like the first draft, this person was like a really boring character, and then you merge this thing in and this, you got this feedback, and then all that stuff happens in the editing process. And it's the same with software, it's the same with music. If you saw the first version of Gumroad, you wouldn't be super impressed with it, right? If you saw the version of the first draft of the short story that I wrote, I don't think you'd be that impressed with it. What you're seeing is the 6th or 7th draft or the 10,000th version of Gumroad, and all the ideas of other people that I stole. You know, all the people that emailed me that were like, "Hey, it's really stupid that Gumroad does this thing. You should do this thing instead." And sometimes they're right, and I'll just be like, "Cool, yeah, I'll do that." Like, thanks, you know. And that I did that 2 times today, and that makes Gumroad better and better and better. Like, there's no way it would exist in the way it is just by myself. You know, if I spent like, you know, it's been 7 years. If I spent all that 7 years in my basement by myself, it would not be nearly as good as what it is today, because, you know, there's just none of that stuff. Yeah, I think you said it well. You have to justify you have to ask why, right? Why am I adding this? If there's a point to it, great, that's awesome. But often there's not. Often it feels you're uncomfortable with the space.
Yeah.
The silence or something. And you're just like, no, I need to put something there. And like, I mean, you listen to some like, you know, Kanye, I like a lot as a producer, especially. And some of his stuff is like super stripped down.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And like, you can't copy. I mean, it's impossible to, you know, you hear it and you're like, that's perfect. But I would never have been able to do that. I wouldn't even have the confidence to release something like that.
It's ballsy in how stripped down it is.
Totally. But then you listen to his early stuff and it wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, it was a journey for him too. It was a journey for everyone. And you can see that when you go to the early work, but you're even missing a lot of that stuff that he never released. Right. You're not seeing all the, you know, I sometimes with Gumroad, we'll work on a feature for a long time and then we'll ship it. And people will be like, this took you like 3 months? That really? You know, it's like a really easy, simple feature. And it's like, yeah, that's what we thought. And then we like we designed 10 different versions. We tested them. We found these issues with them. And then we ended up with this thing, which seems obvious, but that's because we're showing it to you. You know, we're telling you,
right,
this is the right answer. Yeah, it's good to, I really like that about what I do, because I know it so well with Gumroad that when I think about my writing and my painting, which are developing crafts for me, like I'm conscious of that. Mm-hmm. You know, I've already trained myself not to freak out when I compare myself to like my friend's painting who's been painting for 30 years, you know? Whereas I think if you're new, you're scared. I mean, you can't help but think that, you know? And yeah, I think what you said about word limits is really interesting too. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's so easy to just add more, and not because like you figured out why you're writing and like want to like meaning more. I had a writing teacher at the university that I was taking classes at, Brandon Sanderson, and he always said like go deeper, not wider. So if you have an idea and you need, you're like you need 30,000 extra words, like don't make up new stuff. Mm-hmm. Figure out what you already have and go deeper. Like you already have this magic system, and it like in my novel that I'm working on, it's like a heat-based magic system. So things can get hotter and colder. It's like I wanted a very boring magic system. I like that idea for some reason. And it wasn't about like adding a new character there or a new boss battle or whatever. It was about like, what can you do with heat transfer, right? Like what is possible? Fireworks, thermal vents, that's all underwater stuff. Like I haven't even explored the underwater, like there's so much volcanoes, suns, nuclear. I mean, there's like just a super simple concept. Like what happens when you can make things really hot or really cold, like magically. It turns out there's a lot. And I'm sure I could literally spend my whole life doing research on it and not run out of stuff. So like the idea that like you're already done and now you need to find out more stuff is like rarely true.
Right.
It's pretty, I mean, like, yeah, I'll say less. I'll stop talking now. That's my point. It's so easy. It's so easy to just keep going, but if you've communicated the point,
you've done it. It ties in so well. I often think of my instruments and music as characters in the story. And one of the things that I think is apparent in music is you really can't hear the details in a sound if you have 32 other sounds playing alongside it. So it's kind of like what you said, by eliminating that character, now you can focus on some of the other characters and go deeper. And this idea of, I guess, stripping down is something I've seen you talk about in an interview before. You talk about even like owning things and how, and you mentioned this with your ideas earlier, how if you give your startup idea away to someone, now you don't have to worry about it anymore and it frees your mind. And I guess I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that because, again, with music, it's very easy to clutter yourself up with instruments or plugins and downloads and things. How do you, I guess, incorporate that into your living, your lifestyle, so that you have this like mental bandwidth to actually focus on the stuff you want to do?
That's a really good question. Honestly, it's something I'm probably struggling with more now than I used to. And a lot of it has to do with like my new hobbies because they require like painting requires like a lot of physical stuff. And so does music production, you can't digital stuff, like you just can't make nearly as good. It's not there. Maybe one day. I'm definitely a believer in like the digital is the future. But we have a long way to go still. I think for me, it's like, it's just making sure that like you're using everything, like if you have stuff, you should be using it. And that doesn't mean necessarily physical things in your home, though it definitely applies to that. But just like if you have an album, is every song in the album being used? Like, is there a reason for that thing to be there? And because I do quite strongly believe that your brain is aware of everything, like in your life. You might not be consciously thinking like I have to do dishes tonight or whatever, but your brain knows that, right? Yeah. And so it like just assume it knows that and then get rid of it. Like just assume that it's there. I learned the other day, I don't know if this is true, but it confirms my own biases, so I will believe it. That like every folder on your desktop is open. Like your computer, when you open like a really big folder and it has tons of files and it like kind of slows it down a little bit. Like your computer, the software, it doesn't know the difference between open and closed, right? Like has to know about, it's like the performance effect on your computer is the same. And when I learned that, I was like, okay, I'm going to like delete all these folders. I don't need them anyways. And I kind of think about it like same with your brain, like regardless if you are consciously using something or pulling from a certain part of your brain, like it's still there. It's still taking up some physical, literally physical space. We don't, it's somewhere in this area, right? To the best of our knowledge currently. And so, yeah, just dump it. And like, and I think people get concerned about like, I have this idea and I have these other 50 ideas that I need to do first. So I'm just going to keep that idea over here. And like, it just, you're never going to get to that idea. It's honestly not that good, because by the time you get through 5 of your current ideas, you're going to have learned so much that your perspective has changed so much that that idea doesn't even make sense to you anymore. And you have like 30 more better ideas. You know, there's this idea in writing that people have like a novel, right? Like this thing that they've thought about for a long time, and it's their first novel, and they write it and then they don't sell it because it's not that good. And then they get stuck. They get stuck trying to make it better and better and better, and failing because the fundamentals aren't there yet. And so what you should do is you should go make another, take another idea. Ideas, everyone has ideas. I can give you 50 ideas tomorrow. And write another story, and write another story, and write another story, and try to sell each one. And if it doesn't, like move on to your next story. And you can always go back to your first, novel, but more likely what's going to happen is you're either going to realize it's never going to be published, and that's fine because it wasn't that good. Or you're going to say these 3 things were amazing. And like, it was that intuitive part that you nailed the first time around. Just steal those, put it in a new novel. And you're going to go so much faster because you don't have any of the baggage associated with that thing that you have to worry about. Same thing with music. Like often I'll take, I'll literally take a bit, copy, paste it into a new document, and then just start writing above and below it. And because I've learned so much and I've already familiarized myself with that context, I'm so much faster at it the second time around. Like one of the best things that can happen to you is if you spend like 30 hours painting something and then your computer crashes. And you were like, I can't believe I just lost 30 hours of work. That's so terrible. And then you start again and you do a better painting in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because you've already, all the decision making is you've already done, right? You've already figured out, you've problem solved already. As I was saying before, you've already made yourself better. You've already that stuff has gone into your brain.
Yeah. That didn't crash.
Yeah. That didn't crash, hopefully, right? That's a different thing. And yeah, and you can spit that stuff out so much faster. And yeah, so I think just being focused that, when you move, or when you physically, when you move locations, like to a new city or jobs, the only thing that's staying is yourself and your memories and your knowledge. Everything else is just baggage, right? And so always try to 90% of your value is in your head. 99% of your, right, whatever almost 100%.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's it's similar. Like I used to think of myself as a minimalist, and then I realized it's kind of just like my accent. It's just like what I think is normal. Some people think it's crazy, but I have 2 knives in my house. Turns out knives can cut things. Right? Like a different, I don't know, at least for me, and I have a really nice knife. It's cost me $90. It's amazing. It's honestly, it's fun. It's fun to cut stuff. Never thought that would be fun. And, I don't need 30 knives or whatever, people they get married and they get a registry and they have those knife things with 10 knives. I'm like, you never use 8 of those.
Right.
There's the one that you maybe there's the bread knife or something, and that's all you use. But yeah, I just think, I don't know. I think people are always scared of loss, and they're like, I don't want to give that away. Or I might use it tomorrow. And I just try to be more honest about that. And Gumroad is similar. We'll have features, and it's next quarter, we're going to build this. And then we get distracted. And next quarter, we're going to build that thing that we said we're going to build last quarter. And then 3 years go by. And then I'm like, sorry guys. We're just going to kill that feature. We're not going to do it. And by the way, no one has forgotten it. It's still, we've all, all those discussions have entered our brains, but it's clear that it's not that important.
It would have got done. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not going to get done anyways. And if it does get done, if if it resurfaces, it's going to resurface later anyways if it's important. And it's so much. I just saw it the other day, or maybe today, like a tweet that was like, when you realize you can simplify an idea and it actually memorable, that's when you're onto something. And I found that with Gumroad too. When I'm able to take two features that we've been working on, or one that's live and one that's not live, or whatever, and merge them and be like, actually, this one thing can do both of those things. That's when like, yeah, that's definitely what we should be doing, because it simplifies things for users. It simplifies things for us. It's less to think about when we're building new stuff. It's cheaper typically in terms of just code complexity, and it's probably more performant, and yeah, it's just better. I mean, it's like, why would you not do it? Right. I think some people obsess about, I have another thought, but
well, it's easy to get into the complexity, thinking complex is better.
Yeah. I think also, just to add a little bit, like, I'm always biased towards being prolific. I really like that word because it really communicates to me that, like, your goal is to make a lot of stuff. It's not to make one amazing thing. And the more that you can wrap your head around that, I think the better off you're going to be, because you're like, I'm going to make 100 songs this year or something, and your 100th song is going to be so much better than your first song. Or your 78th song is going to be the best. Who knows? But if you only like obsess over 5, like, they're just not going to, and you're not going to let the crazy weird stuff happen. Right. Like, you're not going to really explore. Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm painting and I'm like, I'm going to do a painting a day and it's going to take me 40 minutes, I'm going to do some weird stuff.
Right.
And like, one of those weird things is going to be like, wait a second, like, I actually really like that. And then that's going to totally change the way I think about painting. But if I never like gave myself the flexibility to do that, it would have never happened. I would have been like, oh, I'm just going to do the same painting because I know I'm good at that. I know I'm good at painting trees. I'm just going to do that. I hate painting cars. But then you paint a car and turns out you really like cars, or you don't, but you still learned something about painting from that you couldn't have learned from painting trees, that you can go apply to painting trees anyways. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're a musician and you don't leave your genre, like, to me, that says something about you. That's probably not good. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, it's not to say you need to be producing and, like, publishing stuff in every genre, but, like, you need to be listening to it. You need to be thinking about it. You need to be understanding it. Because there's stuff to learn from everything.
Yeah, go on that journey. Explore.
Yeah, totally. And limit, you can limit it. You can just say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a day just like listening to some new stuff. Mm-hmm. And like, you're going to learn like a lot more than I think you probably think you will.
I like that. And it's a great point because, like you said, if you're just doing 5 tracks a year or 5 paintings, you're going to really focus and overthink everything. Whereas when you're doing your half hour, crash course painting or song, you just, let's do something crazy.
And like, so much of it is like, I don't know. In painting, we use the word composition. I don't know if that's the same word in like music and sound production and stuff, but it's this idea that like the general is what matters, not the specific, right? The overall composition. And yeah, exactly. And if you're spending 30 hours on a song, you're probably spending a few hours, 5 hours maybe, on the composition, the big stuff, the huge movements. And then you're spending like 25 hours refining all the details, And the stuff that makes awesome stuff awesome is not the details. It's those first things. So if you limit yourself, you're constantly focused on getting back to the basics and getting better and better at the huge movement stuff. And the details will come over time, Like when I have a song and I'm like, that's so good. Like there's that new Chance the Rapper song, I Might Need Security, that I love. And the backing track is like someone saying "fuck you" over and over again. And it's amazing. It's such a good song, and it's crazy. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense, you know. But I'm sure that was like a random thing, and it just worked. And it worked. And it doesn't matter how much time you spend on the details. Like it's that idea that is what makes that song good, you know.
And that probably doesn't happen if you're working on your one gem of the year.
Yeah, you're probably you're probably not going to take a risk like that. Or like
Right.
Ariana Grande. I don't know what people think of her, but I think her music actually is pretty good. And Thank You Next, I think, is actually a really good song. And I don't think that song could have happened without like the weird stuff that happened in her life. And she like, you know, like made this thing, and it happened really quickly. And it's interesting. And not only is it interesting, and it captured, like, it became part of the zeitgeist, right? It became a meme. It became like this big sensational thing. And I think that's because people felt something in that that's deeper than like, I don't think people are like, oh, Thank You Next. Like that's such a technically brilliant song. I don't think I've never, but it's like, that is a like, that was hard to write, or that was hard to read, or that was hard to listen to, or that was emotional, or whatever. And you feel like you went on a journey with her. That's what made that song good, in my view, right? It's the same thing with like any of these, I mean, you can walk out of a movie and it's like it's terrible in so many ways, but you didn't notice because you were like, the story was so good. The characters were you were just in it with them. And all the other stuff like didn't matter that much, you know?
Yeah, the big picture's right.
Totally. Yeah. And that's all you remember anyways, right? Because maybe the details are awesome, and they're awesome when you're thinking about them and like listening to the song. But most of any experience is remembering the experience, right? Like when I say I love that song, I'm not listening to the song right now. I'm like, there's a memory in my head of that song, which is what I like. And when it's like it's been run through a filter and like blurred out, and all I have is the big idea now, and that's what I love. It's not, I can't tell you a single detail of any song that I love. Like, oh, I love that part in Daft Punk's Contact, whatever, you know. I'm sure I do, but like I can't tell you, you know.
Yeah.
But it's the big idea. It's like the that gets you, that makes, you know, like Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. It's, everyone knows the idea behind that song, even if they can't vocalize it. It's like just this awesome, super repetitive, robotic, like, you know, thing. And I'm sure I'm someone listening is like, that's not it at all. But the same reason that they're angry at me is the same reason why I love that song. It's because they know the story, right? And they are attached to it.
Maybe on this show they might say that, as you know, music producers who really do hone in on the details. But that can sometimes be the curse of getting so deep in an art, is that maybe you in painting, the brush strokes are just incredible, and
yeah, totally.
I'm gonna be like,
totally,
it makes me feel this, you know. And
totally. Yeah, and like you have to understand as an artist that like you can get obsessed about the brushstrokes, and I do. Like I love brushstrokes. I could talk about them for days. But if someone looks at like what I think is a terrible painting, but loves it, that's a better painting to them. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. Like, you know, it's like if you read a book and you don't like the book, and like it takes you like a semester of a college class to like realize the greatness of it. Like to them, it wasn't that good of a book. Like, you know, and that's the way that I view things. Like I view things as like, I want to make things that people use and people enjoy. So I don't as much care about like the sophistication, right, of or the nuance or the depth. That's just my personal beliefs. Like I love books. Like I think Harry Potter is one of the best books ever because it's so engaging. The world is so well thought out. Is it the best book technically? No, of course not. Is it flawed? Yeah, it's like there's plot holes everywhere. But as a reader, you don't even think about it because it's so engrossing, you know. Whereas like you read Moby Dick and you're like, that's so boring. And like I'm sure Moby Dick is technically a better book than Harry Potter. But like, if I had to pick one to have written, it's
Yeah.
going to be Harry Potter, you know?
Right. Right.
That's just a personal decision. I'm sure music, it's similar, you know? It's like, you might hate Ariana Grande or like Justin Bieber or whatever, and you might love somebody else, who knows? Um, and that's fine. I mean, that's just, you love, and you have to make more of that stuff, and like your audience will like that stuff too. And there's enough people for everybody.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the whole perspective thing, I guess we were doing at the beginning here. You know, your what you filter in and what you take in.
Totally. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, you listen to a song and you get excited about that part of it, the details, like that really cool sound effect or what have you. Yeah. And also, I think one of, you know, my perspective is also filtered through running a business, right? And so I'm always a little bit more conscious, I think, of like the economics of everything and the scale.
Mm.
So I'm always a little bit more business focused. Like, what is the, not just is this a good story, but is this a story that people want right now? Right? Like, I can have an amazing idea and no one wants it, right? Like Bitcoin. Like, who knows? Like, sounds cool. Like, yeah, it's a very sexy thing. It makes a lot of sense. But turns out, at least right now, like maybe in a few years or who knows, like people will really want and benefit from it, you know?
Right. Might not be ready for that yet.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm. Well, listen, I know you are pressed for time here, and I don't want to invade your time space too much. You've been super generous and really fun talking to you. I love these connections because I think the more we can understand how something like art and creation applies in all of these different realms, the more we can go deeper in our own
Totally.
specific, journey, whichever medium that might be. And I took a lot of notes listening to you. It's that like really struck a chord with me and make a lot of sense, especially when I start thinking about like what I appreciate and where I'm trying to go as a direction and what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So
Totally. I mean, yeah, I agree. It's sometimes it's like you just want to focus on music because that's what you want to get really, really good at. But it's kind of like what we talked about. It's sometimes you need to detach yourself from it and like
yeah,
exploring, just like reading someone else's words, like exploring a different industry and how they think about it is going to help you look at your own work more objectively, you know?
right.
And everything is the same, honestly, like going from writing to painting to working on software to, I'm sure if I went into any other pursuit, like it's basically all the same thing, which is we're all a bunch of human beings trying to like communicate with each other and like make each other happy and laugh or whatever, and it's music and art and all these different things. They're just different ways of doing that, like communicating us. Like the English language is so flawed and I can't just like, I wish I could just like take my brain and like put it into your brain and you could do the same and we could all, you know, be the Beatles or whatever. But not
That's
possible.
coming, isn't it?
I don't know. We'll see what Elon Musk is working on next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, for now we have music and we have songs and books to read to try getting closer to that synchronicity or whatever.
Well, I think that is part of the magic of it too. This like discovery of what people are going through. I think if we just totally all got it and knew everything, there goes the magic and the mystery a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I really
yeah, it
enjoyed
was
my
a pleasure.
time. Super fun.
Do you want to direct the listeners anywhere to check out some of your work? I didn't even get to talk about. I just read your short story this afternoon. It was awesome, Across the Border. Real nice
Yeah,
story about like a highly advanced technological world that sort of craves a more intimate touch, which
yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean,
really nice. Like that a
if
lot.
you want to, honestly, the best place to go is my Twitter account, which is just SHL, which makes it easy. And then if you click my website, that'll take you to everywhere else. If you're ever, Gumroad.com. I have an art account on Instagram, SHL Paints. where you can see some subpar art. And Across the Board is a short story I wrote that's on Amazon, and soon will be on Gumroad once their exclusivity expires. I hate Amazon, but respect them too. But yeah, I think if you have any questions, or if anyone has any questions, or you can email me or send me a DM on Twitter. I'm definitely busy, but also definitely always interested to talk to more people and continue these conversations. So
Well, I
thanks
think
again for having me on.
that's a powerful thing you're doing. You're very open to the user, customer creators, and just the input of people. And I think that's evident in the final product of what you're doing with Gumroad.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
All right. Thanks so much for being here. And thanks everyone for listening. Have a great day.